And welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:09 p.m. in an ever darker, grimmer, more dismal, more depressing, more life debilitating city of Budapest, where fall is very much upon us, and as can be seen by my succumbing to these terrible fall allergies. However, having started on these terrible, depressing note, let me welcome everybody who has joined me. I really appreciate it. It's time for Tuesday evening, my time, Tuesday afternoon in the United States edition of the the live stream. I see Peter Kovic is here. I wonder, I don't know whether you're a football supporter, but you're obviously not watching the football. Neither am I, of course, because I'm here on the live stream. But I did notice just before we started, Hungary had taken a lead against Portugal. Not that I think Hungary is going to retain that lead. Whether Hungary will be Julian says Budapest is not selling the city right for future tourism. Well, if the Hungarian tourist board had got in touch with me and says, "Hey, we're going to pay you whatever, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever, to sell the city to international clientele," I'd take the money, tell the world what a fantastic place this is. But anyway. So welcome everybody, and so Ahmadovich Nas says, "Good evening, George. Today in Moscow, weather is like an escape from a summer heat, except for the early fall of darkness." Yeah, the darkness. That's exactly what it is. Um, and anyway, I mean, obviously the big news of the day is the attack on Qatar by Israel. Now, it's nothing too surprising. That's the way Israel operates. However, um, for some reason, Israel has had a hands-off policy when it's come to Qatar. So Israel has attacked Hamas leaders in Iran, obviously. It's attacked them in Lebanon. It's attacked them in Syria, and but it's had a hands-off policy when it comes to Qatar. So Qatar is really a U.S. ally. I remember Trump, when he made his big Middle East visit a few months ago, he visited the United Arab Emirates, he visited Saudi Arabia, and he visited Qatar. Um, and, um, and Qatar has played this role of a mediator as between Israel and Hamas. So Hamas leaders have resided in Qatar, but nonetheless, Israel has respected, to the extent that Israel respects anything, Qatar's role as a mediator. But now, suddenly, boom, that policy is gone, and Israel launched this attack on Doha, supposedly to kill off some some Hamas leaders residing there. The full extent of the damage and the casualties, I think, are a little hazy at the moment. We'll come to that. We'll discuss those that story. Get Iskander says, "Salute from Serbia." Thank you very much. I always like hearing getting salutes from Serbia. So that's very nice. Um, and then we have this. We have today the extraordinary spectacle of uh, of uh, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu giving a news conference about the attack on Qatar, but he gave the news conference from the U.S. Embassy, which is kind of an extraordinary thing to do. I mean, you have an Israeli prime minister who is delivering a message to the press from the U.S. Embassy. I've never seen anything quite like that. And he seemed to be, I mean, he was obviously, he was introduced at the news conference by the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who was a complete insane Christian Zionist. And so he, there it was. He gave this news conference, and I know it's a little hard to take, and Netanyahu is not everyone's glass of tea, certainly not mine. But let's just watch a little bit of that news conference from the U.S. Embassy today. Where are we? Okay, and here is Netanyahu.
On this day, as in previous days, Israel acted wholly independently, and we take full responsibility for this action. And this action can open the door to an end of the war in Gaza. Israel has accepted the proposal put forward by President Trump to end the war, beginning with the immediate release of all our hostages, which have been held in the dungeons of Gaza for 700 days. If President Trump's proposal is accepted, the war can end immediately. We can begin once again to pursue the expansion of peace in our region for the benefit of all. But I want to close.
We want the expansion of peace for the benefit of all. We will resume, which is Israel has been engaged in the expansion of peace for the benefit of all.
Close by directing my words to the people of Gaza. Don't be derailed by these murderous terrorists, by these killers. They don't care a hoot about you. They live in sumptuous villas. You can't imagine how sumptuous. Away from this battle scene. Their partners in Gaza don't worry about you. They go to the underground tunnels and they keep you above ground so you serve as human shields for them. Don't be derailed by these killers. Stand up for your rights and for your future. Make peace with us. Accept President Trump's proposal. Don't worry. You can do it, and we can promise you a different future. But you've got to take these people out of the way. If you do,
all right,
there is no limit to our common future.
All right. So what was, I think, interesting here was Netanyahu's declaration that this was an independent action, independent of the United States. Now, as I said, so here is Netanyahu making this statement in the U.S. Embassy, like, as if somehow the U.S. Embassy is kind of his own personal property, like his own back garden. But he said, well, we basically we had just attacked an ally of the United States, something that Trump visited this country just a few months ago, and spoke incredibly well of Qatar. So then we all waited with bated breath. Well, what's the White House going to say about this? I mean, because after all, the United States can't be very happy with this attack on a on a purported friend of the United States, and then finally, Caroline Leavitt came out, and this is what she said. Let's take a look.
The world knows that this is a priority for the President of the United States. Gabe.
Thank you, Caroline. Regarding the Israeli strike in Doha, how much time or how much of a heads up did the U.S. get, and does the president support the strike?
Sure. Well, I have a statement to read for all of you with respect to the Israeli strike in Doha, and here it is. This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel...
Notice, listen to what she just said. The United States, let's just go back again. Let's go just back again a little bit. The United States government was notified by the U.S. military, not Israel. Israel didn't notify the United States, the U.S. military. So let's listen to again what she said.
Caroline, regarding the Israeli strike in Doha, how much time or how much of a heads up did the U.S. get, and does the president support the strike?
Sure. Well, I have a statement to read for all of you with respect to the Israeli strike in Doha, and here it is. This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar.
Very unfortunate. It was located in Doha, Qatar. Well, it was located there, but it's very unfortunate. So now, right away, you have to think about this, that United States was not notified ahead of time by Israel. And now, that's at least what the United States is claiming, because that at least gives the United States a plausible deniability. It says, well, we didn't know. We weren't notified about this. So we don't necessarily have to accept this claim, but at least that's the story that the White House is going with, where that we were not told ahead of time by Israel about this attack.
Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. President Trump immediately directed...
So he's saying, well, it doesn't advance our goal to attack Qatar, but it does advance our goal to attack Hamas. Well, that's already a bit of a head scratcher, because they attack Hamas in Qatar, so presumably, then that does advance an American goal. I mean, it's already very confusing what you just said there. All right, let's go on.
Special Envoy Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack, which he did. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States. Gaza is a of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. President Trump immediately directed Special Envoy Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack.
All right, so we got the timeline. We get the story is that the United States military informs the administration that an Israeli attack is impending, and then Trump somehow the story this. I mean, I don't know how much advance notice they got, but the Trump then hears this information and then instructs Witkoff to tell the Qataris that this attack is coming. A bit bloody late in the day, but nonetheless, okay.
Which he did. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack. President Trump wants all of the hostages in Gaza and the bodies of the dead released, and this war to end now. President Trump also spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu after the attack. The Prime Minister told President Trump that he wants to make peace, and quickly. President Trump believes this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. The president...
It's a very unfortunate incident, but it can serve as an opportunity for peace. Well, right away, that's a little confusing because, as would become clear about when it comes to this attack, that this was an attack on the negotiators um, who were negotiating with Witkoff and therefore Trump all this time. So if you say it's an unfortunate incident, yeah, you could say it's an unfortunate incident because you know you're attacking the negotiators, and how could this be an opportunity for peace if you've attacked the negotiators? I mean, if you, I mean, obviously, I mean, if you kill off the people who are trying to negotiate an agreement, then it's unlikely you're going to get an agreement. I mean, that's, I think it's, I think we can safely say that. Um, but anyway, she goes on.
And also spoke to the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar and thanked them for their support and friendship to our country. He assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil.
He assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil. Now that's very very interesting because what is the basis of his assurance? I mean, we know Israel is continually attacking Hamas leaders wherever they are. They've had a hands-off policy with Qatar um, for this time, but now apparently that hands-off policy is gone. And then Trump says, "Well, it won't happen again." What did Netanyahu give him a pledge? He's not going to do it again. All right. Well, you know, you know, Netanyahu's words don't count for very much. Anyway, so she's made this very brief statement.
To be clear, the president disagrees with the location of the strike and that he passed that along to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
The president just confirmed that in the statement that I just read to you, which I spoke with him about before coming out here. Jackie.
Thank you, Caroline. So is the president upset with Netanyahu now?
The president made his thoughts and concerns about this very clear, and he spoke again both to Prime Minister Netanyahu and also the Emir and the Prime Minister of Qatar after this attack. And the president has always made it very clear that he wants peace in the Middle East, just like he sought that and accomplished that in his first term. He expects all of our allies and friends in the region, that includes both Qatar and Israel, to seek peace as well. And he wants to see that happen, and he's working with all of our allies in the region to get that done.
Any consequences, so to speak, for Netanyahu doing this, as it sounds, against the president's wishes, or at least his belief that it was appropriate? Is there going to be any directive from the president to Netanyahu in terms of what's allowed in the future? And also, is there any concern this could jeopardize the Abraham Accords?
Look, that's a decision only the president can make. With respect to your first question, to answer your second question, as you heard from the president, he said he believes that this can serve as an opportunity for peace, and he's still actively and aggressively pursuing it with all of our allies and partners in the region. Jennifer?
All right, so it's an opportunity for peace, and so yeah, very unfortunate. And then, but it's not going to happen again. And how do you know it isn't going to happen again? Well, it just won't happen again. So, but one can already see from here that there will be no consequences for Netanyahu, because apparently this is turned out to be an opportunity for peace, and as we saw from Netanyahu's earlier news conference, he said, an opportunity for peace. Put me down for that. Israel is always looking for peace. So, we don't know at this stage whether, first of all, whether really Israel just did this on its own without giving the United States a heads up. Because that's just that's Israel's claim, and that's the U.S. claim. But that, of course, is simply giving the U.S. a plausible deniability. Say, yeah, we didn't know, because if Israel were to say, yeah, we gave the U.S. a heads up, and basically the U.S. signed off on it, then that would be rather embarrassing given the supposed friendship with Qatar. I mean, as I say, Trump visited Qatar just a few months ago. So, therefore, it's obviously a lot more convenient to state, yeah, we didn't really know about it. It won't happen again, and it provides an opportunity for peace. So, if you just look at the some of the media stories about this, because remember, what was happening was that there was some kind of negotiations, baloney, going on, yet more negotiations between the United States and Israel and Hamas to bring peace to Gaza, so that we'll release some hostages, and then yeah, we'll release them on the first day, and then we'll go and work for a long ceasefire. I mean, it's been going on. This nonsense has been going on now for months and months and months. But the media have been reporting it, that somehow the Trump administration is really seriously engaged in these negotiations with Israel and Hamas to release the hostages. As always, whenever the subject comes up, it's always limited to this one thing, which was that the hostages, release the hostages. All the rest about how about peace in Gaza, that's all put on, forget all that. The only important thing is the release of the hostages. Anyway, so this has been going on, and again, no one seems to think of there's always a pattern with Israel, which is whenever there are negotiations taking place, lo and behold, Israel always sabotages the negotiations by timing some terrorist act right in the midst of the negotiation. So Trump's going on about these negotiations with Israel and Hamas, and he sends out these truths, and then Israel then launches this attack on the Hamas negotiator, thus making Trump, as usual, look a complete fool. As Israel always does this. It always makes American presidents look like complete fools. And then Trump, or it could have been Biden, it could have been anyone, would say, okay, well, not very nice, unfortunate, but this could be an opportunity for peace. Anyway, so here's some of the media coverage. And here was the Guardian just simply reported verbatim her statement, which she says, again, if you look carefully at the words, which unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar, unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. So you've basically undercut the previous sentence. In other words, Netanyahu was pursuing a worthy goal. Okay, so that previous sentence meant nothing. President Trump immediately directed Special Envoy Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack, which he did. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of the attack. President Trump wants all of the hostages and the bodies of the dead and this war to end now. President Trump also spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu after the attack. He told President Trump that he wants to make peace and quickly. So that's Netanyahu told President Trump he wants to make peace and quickly, and be quick about it. President Trump believes this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. The president also spoke to the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar and thanked them for their friendship to our country, he assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil. Now, when Trump says something like that, leave aside whether Israel will actually follow through, but the fact that he can say that, such a thing will not happen again, is more or less an admission that essentially the United States has uh, great power over Israel. The United States can tell Israel what to do and what not to do if it chooses to do so. But of course, the United States does not choose to do so. And that's why. But whenever, I mean, in this case, it was obviously a bit of an embarrassment with Qatar, and he basically had to speak to Qatar, and then made clear, it won't happen again. In other words, I can tell Israel not to do it again, and Israel will listen to me. Oh, good. So you admit that when you want to, you can lay the law down to Israel, and Israel will listen to you when you want to. It's just that you don't want to. And so, so this is the president. President personally speaks to the emir and prime minister of Qatar, thanks them for their friendship to our country. He assured them such a thing will not happen again. Now, the thing here is that we don't know exactly what took place between the United States and Israel before the attack, but here's the Times of Israel, which seems to think, or seems to claim, that in fact Trump gave Israel the green light for strike on Hamas leadership in Qatar. Now, that also may not be true. This may be disinformation being peddled from Israel. But here's the story. US President Donald Trump gave the green light for the Israeli strike in Qatar, a senior Israeli official tells Channel 12. Longtime Hamas leader Khaled Mashal, whom Israel tried to assassinate in Jordan in 1997, was among the Hamas leaders at the meeting targeted by Israel. And then here is the also Times of Israel, which then reports as to who supposedly was killed. And it says Arabic media outlets report that 5 people were killed in a strike on Qatar. The reports say there were Hamas members, but not part of the leadership. According to the reports, the dead are, Himam al-Hayya, the son of Hamas Gaza leader Khalil al-Hayya, and then Jihad Labad Abu Bilal, Khalil al-Hayya's office director, and 3 associates, probably referring to bodyguards or advisors of senior Hamas officials. However, the Israelis, of course, said, no, we actually did kill some of Hamas leaders. Israeli officials have said they are increasingly optimistic that Hamas's leadership was killed after 10 bombs were dropped on the site, noting that Hamas has tried to conceal the loss of its leaders in the past. So we'll see, who was indeed killed. CNN says Israel killed 5 but failed to assassinate negotiating delegations. So that's the CNN. But CNN is just going by the reports from the Arabic media, which may or may not be true. Hamas said that an Israeli strike on Doha killed 5 members but did not assassinate the negotiating delegation. We affirm the enemy's failure to assassinate the brothers in the negotiating delegation, the militant group said in a statement, adding that 5 of its members were killed in the strike. One of the main targets of the strike was Hamas chief negotiator Khalil al-Hayya, but he was not listed among the dead. According to Hamas, al-Hayya's son and the director of his office were killed in the strike. Qatar and Hamas both said that a Qatari security official died in the strike as well. And Hamas says the targeting of the negotiating delegation at a moment when discussions are taking place regarding the recent proposal from US President Donald Trump confirms without a doubt that Netanyahu and his government do not want to reach any agreement. Yeah, I mean, whatever else you can say about Hamas, they're absolutely spot on there. No question that's what Israel always does. It wants to make sure no negotiations are taking place, and by attacking whoever, attacking the negotiators, attacking some senior uh, leadership figure, and so on. That's what Israel always does. And then, but why it's also a bit of a problem here with this attack is that a Qatari official was also killed. Um, Interestingly, the Trump statement made no acknowledgement of that. I mean, they weren't happy about the Israel's attack on Doha, but they made no comment on the fact that an official of the Qatari government was killed. But here it says, according to CNN, Qatar's interior ministry confirmed explosions heard in Doha today were caused by an Israeli attack targeting residential court headquarters where members of the Hamas political bureau reside. According to initial reports, the attack led to the death of Deputy Corporal Badr Saad Mohammed Al Humaidi Al Dosari, a member of the Internal Security Force who was on duty at the site of the strike. That's according to the Qatar Interior Ministry. Several other security personnel sustained injuries. So that is definitely a problem. But Trump made no mention of this. And then here's the Axios, who are usually quite informed, and they say blah blah. The assassination attempt in the Qatari capital comes amid a renewed U.S. effort to reach a Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Of course it is. Right? That's exactly when you want to, for Israel, that's exactly when you make your attack. When there's a renewed U.S. effort to reach a Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. And this was the first time Israel had ever struck inside Qatar, which is more than 1,000 miles away. And then Qatar, a key U.S. ally, has been a primary mediator in these efforts since October the 7th attack. Qatar's interior ministry said a number of its internal security force was killed. Okay, well, according to the other report, it was only one person was killed, but here he says several were killed. We'll see. A U.S. official confirmed the Trump administration was only notified as the Israeli attack began, after missiles were in the air, leaving them no opportunity to weigh in. So that's obviously that's the story that they're going with, and that was the story of Caroline Levitt. Hamas claimed in an official statement that the attack had failed to eliminate its leadership, but did kill 5 members, so on. And then Qatar's prime minister met on Monday with Hamas leaders in Doha and pressed them to accept the new U.S. proposal. The strike took place when Hamas leaders met to discuss the Trump administration's proposal. A source with knowledge said some Hamas leaders even traveled to Doha from Turkey for the meeting. And this was Trump's truth, if you recall, about 2 days ago. He says, everyone wants the hostages home. Everyone wants this war to end. The Israelis have accepted my terms. It is time for Hamas to accept as well. I have warned Hamas about the consequences of not accepting. This is my last warning. There will not be another one. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, Caroline Levitt in that news conference was actually asked, well, when Trump warned Hamas about the consequences of not accepting, was this the consequence that Trump warned about? And she explicitly said, no, it was not. And she was absolutely adamant, no, it was not, because This was Israel's action, and Israel's alone. The United States had no knowledge of it whatsoever. So that's so Trump is denying for the time being, but he's denying that the United States had anything to do with this attack, and that this warning to Hamas had was nothing to do with what happened today. And so this now goes back to the question of what is this Trump plan? I mean, they keep talking about this Trump negotiating plan, but no one quite knows what is this Trump plan. So this was Haaretz the other day. It says Trump's reported plan proposes a comprehensive deal to end the war, under which all 48 hostages would be returned on the first day of a ceasefire in exchange for Israel canceling its planned operation to capture Gaza City. Trump said in a social media post that the Israelis have accepted his terms. But as it turns out, of course, that's completely untrue. Because here it says Channel 12 News reported on Sunday that Trump has put forward a comprehensive proposal to secure the release of all hostages and bring the war to an end. Under the reported terms, all 48 hostages, both the living and the deceased, would be returned on the first day of a ceasefire, and Israel would cancel its planned operation to capture Gaza City. So I mean, you have to believe this in the Tooth Fairy, that on the first day, Hamas would return all of the hostages, both the living and the dead, and Israel would cancel its operation to capture Gaza City. Just like that. They've got all the hostages back, and Israel said, well, we gave our word. We absolutely promised not to go after Gaza City. No, and right, we gave our word. We can't break our word. You know, people trust us. People, our word is our bond. It's kind of nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. I mean, Hamas returns all the hostages on day one. Later on day one, Israel levels Gaza City. The deal would also include the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners and detainees, among them hundreds serving life sentences. According to the report, once the ceasefire begins, negotiations on ending the war would immediately commence under Trump's leadership, and fighting would not resume as long as the talks were ongoing. But that's quite a caveat. As long as the talks were ongoing. But what if the talks are not ongoing? Then the fighting can resume. So there'll be no leveling of Gaza while the talks are ongoing. But if there are no talks ongoing, then the leveling of Gaza can resume. Okay, I mean that's quite a caveat. And then Dropsite revealed what this Trump plan consists of. It says this is the 100-word ceasefire proposal Trump sent to Hamas. And here it is. The main proposal. 1, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be released within 48 hours of signing. Okay? We already heard that. 2, numbers consistent with previous releases. Palestinian prisoners sentenced to life and detainees from Gaza will be released within 48 hours. Okay, so that was all hostages, alive and deceased, will be released within 48 hours. So, okay, they've got 48 hours to release them. And the Palestinians will also be released within 48 hours. All right. A ceasefire will go into effect upon implementation for a period of 60 days or until negotiations are concluded. Okay, so you got until negotiations are concluded. But I guess if the negotiations break down, does the fighting resume? or this the 60 days, or just that will be respected. The 60 days will be respected. Um, President Trump will guarantee that the parties negotiate in good faith until an agreement is reached. Well, that's a bit of a problem. That President Trump has shown himself to be a shill for Israel. It's unfortunate, but you have to be realistic. Um, During the 12-day war against Iran, Trump continued to refer to Israel as we, and the war as our. So if he identifies himself completely with Israel, as he does, then I don't quite see how his guarantees will be worth anything. President Trump will guarantee that the parties negotiate in good faith until an agreement is reached. And what if he basically, Netanyahu just tells him, I don't think we should negotiate. These are all a bunch of terrorists who behead babies and rape women. We can't negotiate with them. What's Trump going to say? Well, I gave my word. We have to negotiate in good faith. Or is he going to accept, we, our, and us, that we can't possibly negotiate with, mass killers and mass rapists? The issues to be negotiated include the definition of Hamas, the definition of disarmament, the formation of a new government, the withdrawal of Israeli forces upon the formation of the government or upon successful conclusion of negotiations, and amnesty for Hamas members. Now, this is ludicrous. None of that is going to happen. There's not going to be an amnesty for Hamas members. This is a joke. The formation of a new government, Israel is not going to take part in the formation of a new government. The definition of disarmament, Israel has already presented its definition, which is all Hamas is disarmed. The withdrawal of Israeli forces, again, Israel is not going to withdraw Israeli forces upon the formation of a government. I mean, we already know that they're not going to accept any government. They're not going to accept a government in which is Hamas. They're not even going to accept a government that involves the Palestinian Authority, and an open flow of aid into Gaza upon the implementation of the agreement. So none of this is really terribly plausible. So this story in Drop Site, it says that he says that during the 2-month period of negotiation, the outline proposes the disarmament of Gaza and the formation of a new government, saying the withdrawal of Israeli forces would be addressed only after a new governing authority is installed or negotiations are completed. It also mentions amnesty for Hamas members, and it says it doesn't know what does definition of Hamas mean. It doesn't explain what that terminology means. And it says the latest U.S. outreach to Hamas begins on August the 31st via back-channel intermediaries working under the direction of Witkoff. Last Friday, Trump claimed that the U.S. was in deep negotiations with Hamas. The Hamas official said he would not characterize the situation as deep negotiations, adding that Hamas made clear to the U.S. intermediaries that it was open to either a partial or a comprehensive deal. Trump said that his message was that if all Israeli captives were not released at once, it's going to be a tough situation. It's going to be nasty, but Israel's choice. But that's my opinion, and that's that's the story there. Now, there's nothing here even remotely plausible. I mean, the whole idea that Israel, after it gets its hostages back, will start negotiating seriously about a long-term peace. I mean, it cannot happen. They've had all these opportunities to negotiate, and they've always said no. I mean, they're not going to do it, and they've already made clear, as I said, they're not going to accept Hamas in Gaza. They're not going to accept the Palestinian Authority, and they're not going to accept really pretty much even any kind of Arab I don't know consortium to run Gaza. I mean, they're not going to do this. So now, it's clear that Israel is not even interested in even this limited thing, which basically they're just going to get the hostages back. There's nothing else after that. But even that, Israel has no interest in, because why attack the negotiators today? So even this limited thing, which you think, hey, you're pretty much you're going to get the hostages back, that you can just simply resume your war. You can destroy Gaza City to your heart's content. Just keep going. And even so, Israel refused to accept that. Anyway, let's then go to our locals board, where the gagglers, the people who care about the how the dogs fared and looked after, and above all the tip jar, which causes the dogs a great deal of distress. So that they all care very much about the dogs. So they come to the locals board. They're our locals members, and we really appreciate them. So Danaki, always good to see you, Danaki, says, Kedvesh George, dear George, what a relief that the new gene editing mRNA kill shots do not contain thimerosal, which Trump said is the real poison. Magatards embracing the news, improved vaccines in 543. Yeah, no, that's right. This is the new statement by Trump. It's very strange. I mean, Trump, obviously, he wants to still continue to take credit for Operation Warp Speed, and strangely enough, even well, it's not that strange. I mean, when Robert Kennedy was testifying last week before the Senate, and he was asked, well, President Trump is always taking credit for the Operation Warp Speed. Um, you know, and I think basically, he wants to get the Nobel Prize for that, and I don't know, Nobel Prize for medicine. I don't know what. And do you think he should get it? And he said, "Oh, absolutely, absolutely." So I never quite understood this, and so now Trump, he said last week, "Well, I need to know more information about the vaccines. I need to know really." What are the real numbers as to how many lives were saved and so on. The problem, of course, is that all of these numbers are based on lies, because we know that the numbers of the people who suffered from COVID were ridiculous, or rather, who died um, as a result of COVID. That was the claim. As a result of COVID, were absolutely outrageously distorted, because as long as you die, you died in a car crash, and you had COVID, then you be said, yeah, I mean, this person died of COVID, and this went on and on. These absolutely ridiculous overstatements about the COVID numbers. So Trump said, okay, well, I need to get the real numbers, and then you have to get the with the vaccine, and of course, all of these numbers are presented in absolute lies, since when they compile these statistics, they want to make sure that anyone who suffered ill effects from the mRNA vaccine. Whatever those ill effects were, they had nothing to do with the vaccine. That had to have been a pre-existing condition. So it was the exact opposite. So when it came to COVID, if you got COVID, whatever your pre-existing condition, then you die from COVID. If you had any issue with the vaccine, then it had to be some other pre-existing condition. So that's that. And now this new thing about the thimerosal, which he says is the real poison. I have no idea what he's on about there. I mean, I don't know. Somebody told him about this, and so he's come up with this new story about this thimerosal. So, but it is an issue for him. I mean, because he continues to tout the glories of Operation Warp Speed, and he's and now it is true that the mandates, he didn't really do the mandates thing. That was the Biden administration that went down the mandates path. He didn't do that. But he did sign off on locking the country down, which proved to be absolutely catastrophic for the country and, of course, the economy, of course. But, of course, it's also proved catastrophic for his presidency. So, I think that without the lockdowns, I think he would have won the 2020 election. I mean, it's a disastrous policy. Anyway, and then Danaki goes on. Also, isn't Orban's fall from Trump's graces spectacular? Does he still mention him these days, or just when he calls him to give him the marching orders on Ukraine in the EU, etc.? Well, that's a very interesting observation, because I thought that Orban would be one of the first guests at the White House, because during the years in exile from 2021 to 2025, Orban was the one foreign leader who stuck by Trump. Everyone else abandoned him. They absolutely quickly abandoned him. They were high-fiving one another in delight that we've seen Trump off, he's gone, we'll never see him back again. Macron and the rest of them were absolutely over the moon that Trump was now history. But Orban wasn't. Orban stuck by Trump. And then when Orban, during the time when Hungary was the president of the EU Council, he went off on this peace mission off his own bat. He wasn't representing of the EU, but nonetheless, he was very much on Trump's wavelength. And, he went to Moscow, he went to Kiev, he went to Beijing, and of course, he went to see Trump in Mar-a-Lago. And Orban's message was that we need to bring this war to an end, and the only person who can do it is President Trump. Over and over, he said, the only person who can bring peace, who can bring this war to an end, is President Trump. And Trump did tout Orban's words. He kept saying, have you heard of Viktor Orban? He's this really tough guy. He's a this really tough prime minister of Hungary. And he always says, the only way we can have peace in the world, the only way we can bring all these wars to an end is if we elect President Trump. And Trump was very, very pleased with all of that. And that's why I thought, okay, great. Now he's in office. As first order of business, he'll invite Orban to come and visit him and elicit from Orban the political situation in Europe, and how can we do it, get there, because Orban it would be quite a useful conduit to Putin. Orban could be quite a useful mediator. I mean, I think he'd be a mediator. Well, the Russians would obviously accept him as a mediator. I don't know whether Ukraine would, but Trump could persuade Kiev. I mean, he applies some pressure to accept Orban as a mediator. So I thought that Orban would play a significant role once Trump returned to office. But that hasn't happened. Orban has not been to the White House. Trump doesn't talk very much about him. And the other day, he started talking about the Europeans who are still dependent. He started berating the Europeans who are still dependent on imports of Russian oil and gas. Now, it is true that that a number of European states are indeed continue to import Russian oil and gas, even though they claim they don't. But the case of Hungary and Slovakia is notable because both of them get their oil and gas directly from Russia. They get it by the pipeline through the oil, the Druzhba pipeline that gets oil to Hungary and Slovakia. They got a special dispensation from the EU to continue to receive oil from Russia because they're landlocked and they can't get oil shipments by sea, so they've no choice but to get it from Russia. Now, Hungary has and Slovakia as well have both said we're not going to change this policy. We're going to continue because it's very difficult to change the policy. I mean, our refineries are geared towards refining Russian crude. You can't just simply overnight transform our refineries from one kind of crude to another kind of crude. So Hungary has just openly said we're not going to change our policy. So Trump, when he says, "Hey, you better get yourself off Russian oil and gas," well, that's not going to be is going to fall on some deaf ears from on Hungary and Slovakia because as far as gas goes, that goes through Turk Stream, which obviously through Turkey and then through the Balkans and into Hungary and Slovakia. So they get their oil and gas, and now Trump has suddenly raised this issue about getting oil and gas from Russia, which itself is very, very stupid because the issue was never, who's getting oil and gas from Russia. The issue is bring the bloody war to an end. That's what you said you were going to do. And, why are you berating states who are importing Russian oil and gas? This is what they need. They need this for their energy concerns. Now, you could berate them for being hypocritical. You could say, hey, you keep wanting to apply pressure on Russia, but you go on importing oil and gas from Russia, and that's a good argument, yeah. But that doesn't apply to Hungary and Slovakia because Hungary and Slovakia are saying, give us peace now. Let's end this stupid war now. And you, President Trump, you said that you were going to do this. So why are you suddenly now talking about oil and gas? And yet this is now a preoccupation of Trump on Trump's part that with India and everything, applying this pressure on India. Why are you doing this? You said you were going to bring this war to an end. The fact that some people are getting their oil from Russia. I mean, it's neither here nor there. The fact that India is getting discounted oil from Russia. Why are you preoccupying with that? And now you have Peter Navarro going on about how India is funding the Russian war machine and so on. What do you care? Now Navarro and Trump are sounding like Biden. So somehow that this is that these European states and India and China are funding the Russian war machine. So you're just basically repeating the mindless cliches of the Biden administration about that you're funding the Russian war machine. I thought that the administration was going to bring this war to an end. So you can see that really they're not bringing the war to an end. They're effectively continuing with the Biden policy of trying to apply pressure on Russia. So clearly, Trump is not doing anything for Orban, because what Orban has said, Hungary depends on oil and gas from Russia, and that isn't going to change. That's the Hungarian economy. That it needs this Russian oil and gas. Any move to alternative sources is going to take years and years. And in any case, Hungary doesn't have the resources to make any transformation. So that's one the thing. And then, of course, you've got the issue of Ukraine's membership of the EU. And for some reason, Trump seems to think that that's a really great idea to get Ukraine into the EU. Now, Russia has also said, Putin said the other day that, well, we don't have a problem with Ukraine in the EU. Now, I think I don't really believe when Putin says that. I think uh, even if Russia did take that position in 2013, at the time that Viktor Yanukovych was negotiating the association agreement with the EU, but even then, Russia did object to Ukraine's membership of the EU, or at least at the time of the association agreement, because he said, "Well, you're actually, Ukraine will now have a free market for goods and services with the EU, and a free market for goods and services with Russia. So, in effect, Russia will have a free market with the EU, and obviously that's going to be totally devastating for Russia's economy. So we can't possibly agree to this. And at the very minimum, we would have to end our free market arrangements with the with Ukraine. Um, but Russia didn't really raise the issue then of the basically the security and defense component of the EU, which indeed is a very serious business. So if you join the EU, this isn't just an economic bloc, it's not a trading bloc or a free trade area bloc, it's a military and security bloc. And it's obvious from the various agreements that the EU and NATO have signed. And so, if you're a member of the EU, that's quite a problem for Russia. And we've seen that, countries such as Finland and Sweden, which became members of the EU, that was just simply a passageway into NATO membership. And it's becoming clear that that's also the case with Austria. So that would be a problem. But, I think Putin said, well, we don't have a problem with Ukraine's membership of the EU because he figured that there'll be too many countries raising objections to Ukraine's induction into the EU, chiefly Hungary and Poland, but also France as well. I mean, any country with a very dominant agricultural industry is going to have an issue with cheap Ukrainian agricultural imports being dumped into the European market. So Putin may well have thought, okay, I can say I don't have an issue with Ukraine's membership of the EU because it just isn't going to happen. There'll be too many problems. But Trump now decided that, Ukraine should be in the EU, and apparently he got on the phone and started berating Orban to withdraw his objections to Ukraine's membership of the EU. Now, that's a bit of a problem for Hungary because Hungary has just held a referendum on the subject of Ukraine's membership of the EU. It was done online, so it was, but nonetheless, it was something, I don't know, 92% of those who took part said no to EU membership, and so Orban has sort of vested some political capital in into his campaign against Ukraine's membership of the EU, and particularly as he's got this opposition who are leading him in the polls. They have a comfortable 8-point lead, but Orban has overcome these obstacles before. But they have an 8-point lead, and of course that's their campaign, which is, we're with Brussels, we want to be with Brussels, and we agree with Brussels that Ukraine should be in the EU. So with Trump's intervention on this issue of EU and Ukraine, Trump is effectively supporting the opposition to Orban. And it really is quite ridiculous because Hungary has really rather poor relations with Ukraine. I mean, we've gone through in the past all the issues that Hungary has. We had this spy scandal. We had recently the Ukraine's attacks on the Druzhba pipeline. We had the expulsion of the mutual expulsion of diplomats. Then we had the Hungarian who was beaten to death because he didn't want to be sent to the front. So Hungary and Ukraine really are not on good terms. So it was somewhat peculiar for Trump to call Orban and start pressuring him to withdraw his objections to Ukraine's EU membership, and particularly when he's got this tough re-election fight on his hands. Anyway, so that's that. And then the Denaki says, plus, do the Zionists get a carte blanche to bomb and kill everyone now? Yes. Now, it's the only issue I have with that question is the now. And I guess the Saudis weren't too unhappy with the strike happening over their airspace, or maybe they even provided the map. I don't know. I can't believe the Saudis would be very happy with this. It doesn't sound like anybody was very happy with this. It's as always a really. I mean, it is an embarrassment that these Arab states are putting up with this crap day in, day out, and Israel is just inflicting one humiliation after another, and they're not really. there's no resistance to this. I mean, after all the all the assassinations and everything, and now you've made this attack on Qatar, and Trump, who kind of tries to distance himself from it, says, "Oh, well, maybe this is an opportunity for peace." But it's obviously a total humiliation for the United States, humiliation for Saudi Arabia and Qatar. But they don't really have anywhere else to go. And that's why, and I've said this before, and I think Denaki will agree with me, this whole story of the multipolar world is just all baloney. There is no multipolar world. There's only the United States. Where's Russia in all of this? Where's China in all of this? Where's India in all of this? Essentially, only the weight of the United States is all that matters in the Middle East. Israel can do whatever it wants, humiliate whomever it wants, because it's got a blank check from the United States, and no one can do anything about it. And the Saudis and Qatar and the UAE, they just simply have to go along with this, because there's no alternative. The days when there used to be an alternative, another power block that used to come in and support the other side to Israel, namely the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc, it's not there anymore. That's why there is no multipolar world. Terrible. It's very sad to admit, but there is no multipolarity. And the example of this is, Israel does these things day in, day out, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. And I think, and that was very different back in the 1970s and 80s. Um, and then Danaki says, the Qatari strong condemnation of the cowardly Jewish attack reminds me of Team America's Hans Bricks and his strongly worded threat to Kim Jong Il. Yeah, that was just prior to the invasion of Iraq. Yeah, these are totally, completely impotent gestures. Um, the problem they have, countries like Qatar, which are very small, insignificant states, that the only reason that anyone treats them with respect, they have sovereignty and territorial integrity, they're major players in the world, they're always treated with great respect and reverence, they visit the United States, and the red carpet is laid on for them. The only reason is the United States is happy to allow them to posture in this way. But they have no weight. I mean, they're wealthy. They're very wealthy, but militarily they're insignificant. Geopolitically they're insignificant, except that the United States lavishes this fake respect on them as if they're real major players on the scene, and they act as mediators. Well, we have to. What's the Qataris are acting as mediators, trying to get everything together, because the Americans are happy to go along with this fiction. But the moment Israel says, you know what, we're kind of sick of this, let's kind of hit Qatar, then there's nothing anyone's going to do about it. Hey, but I thought we're supposed to have respect for Qatar. I thought Qatar is now a major player on the world scene. I thought, this is, they're mediators. They're part of the negotiating team. The peace plan. Nope, nope, they're not. Anyway, thank you so much, Danaki. And then Cynthia, always very good to see you, Cynthia. So Cynthia is going to talk about the film yesterday, which is Mulholland Drive, which is of course the David Lynch classic from 2001. We screened it yesterday in our Monday night at the movies season, and so it's still up on locals board. So take a look, and of course, as I always recommend, don't just watch the film. Read Cynthia's really interesting, fascinating background information. Really, just really, really useful analytical tools, particularly in a film like Mulholland Drive, that is very challenging towards any kind of rational interpretation. So, if you find yourself baffled by Mulholland Drive, I think a useful introduction is just reading Cynthia's very learned commentary that it's up on our locals board. Anyway, Cynthia says, there's a lot to unpack in last night's film, George, and far more actually than I want or care to do here, or anywhere else for that matter. Okay, well, that's fair enough. I think it's one of those films that is open to all kinds of interpretation, but then you have to also ask yourself, well, is the film worthy of spending so much time analyzing and interpreting? I mean, is it really of such a high quality that it deserves this? So I have an open mind on that issue. But anyway, Cynthia goes on. However, if you want a deeper understanding of the character Betty Diane, who's played by Naomi Watts, you must view her multifaceted persona through the eyes of the other three blonde characters in the film. One, the blonde prostitute named Lainey. Okay. Okay, that's an interesting one. She only appears very, very briefly. Yeah. Two, the blonde waitress named Rita Betty. Okay, that's not the blonde waitress in the diner. Three, the blonde actress named Camilla. Okay, well, that's very intriguing. Okay, that's yeah. All right, let's go on. Um, and but the blonde Camilla is by far the most crucial persona of Betty Diane, not only because she's an actress, but more importantly, she's the lover of the brunette Camilla. Is she? Um, well, I don't know. That's interesting because the claim that, I mean, maybe there's something more that I may have missed, that we only think that there's something going on between them is in that last kind of party scene where they seem to be quite affectionate with one another, and so it opened at least to the interpretation that she's the lover of the brunette Camilla. Um, but I didn't get that sense that she's the lover, other than that some sort of a the way I took it, that whole kind of affection between the two of them, even a little bit of flirtatious kissing, was a show laid on for um, Betty Diane in order to humiliate her. I mean, they all really set out just to humiliate her. The director, with his whole thing about how, oh, I'm getting engaged to brunette Camilla, and then there's the blonde Camilla, and then she comes over, and they kind of kiss in a very kind of sexy way. But I thought it was just all geared towards humiliating Betty and Diane. But all right, that's I'm open to changing my mind, which explains why Betty Diane is driven over the edge after seeing the blonde Camilla kissing the brunette Camilla at the dinner party. It also explains why some theorize that the presence of mirrors and doppelgangers throughout the film are common representations of same sex desire, or at least in this case, lesbian desire. And there's the picture of the blonde Camilla and the brunette Camilla. And then Cynthia goes on. That in turn explains why Lynch pays direct homage to persona in the scene where Rita dons the blonde wig, styled exactly like Betty's own hair. Rita and Betty then gaze at each other in the mirror, drawing attention to their physical similarity, linking the sequence to the theme of embrace, physical coupling, and the idea of merging and doubling, mirroring and doubles, which are prominent themes throughout the film, serve to further add queerness to the form and content of the film. Um, well, that's that's very interesting. The I guess I didn't quite um, see it that way, because I really thought that um, more or less um, the kind of these actors. I mean, they're all actors, right? So they're all, or actresses. They're all aspiring actresses, and the theme of the film, at least as I take it, I mean, that's one of the themes. I mean, it doesn't lend itself to any straightforward interpretation, but at least one of the themes of it is that these actresses, they all have their dreams, but in some ways they're all kind of interchangeable. They all kind of look alike. I mean, you mentioned the three blondes, which was the waitress in the diner, the prostitute, and Camilla Rhodes, and then Camilla, who then dons the blonde wig, um, and so they're all, and I think even as far as I remember, the director's wife, I think she also was a blonde and also kind of looked looked a little like them. So I took it as more that the kind of the standardization of Hollywood. I mean, it just sort of reduces everyone to the same. They all kind of look alike. They're all blonde, um, and essentially it's physically almost impossible to distinguish them. Now, some of them go on to great success, and some of them go on to complete misery. Now, the film starts off with the, the Betty character, who seems destined to great things. She comes, very pretty, blonde, pretty, and seems really talented. And we assume that she's now all set for a very successful career. Um, as it turns out, she she isn't, or at least as the film portrays it, because she does that audition, but then it turns out that that film is never going to be made. And that's the casting director said sarcastically, that film is never going to be made. Then she goes to apparently to another audition, and but she leaves the audition before um, it's her turn. And in any case, it doesn't really matter because the director has already been told by the mob that he has to hire somebody else. So it wouldn't have even mattered then. So, we kind of, one hand, we're led to think, oh, she's heading towards success, and then we realize, well, actually she's not heading towards any success. And then the film makes this abrupt switch where we see her or a kind of a doppelganger or whatever as this other person, this Diane. Oh God, I forgot the surname. Diane, whatever her name. Diane. It wasn't Diane Sawyer, but something like that. Who is now, living a kind of a fairly miserable life. Her career obviously has never really taken off. Now that we can say, well, is that a separate person? Is that a dream or an alternative reality? Or is it that it's the same person, but what happens when all of your dreams have been shattered? And that could go to the other blondes. I mean, the other blonde, which was the prostitute. Why is this this blonde now a prostitute? Well, probably she also tried to have a career in Hollywood. Turns out she didn't do it. So they all kind of look alike. Hollywood kind of homogenizes everybody. They're all made to look alike, but for some reason, only a few actually make it. And as we kind of led to believe that Camilla, who starts off as this, at least the brunette Camilla, starts off with with an amnesia and a kind of whatever. She's the one who is weak and vulnerable, and then apparently then she becomes very successful. Quite how that came about, we really don't know. And so the business about the lesbianism is more. I mean, that's just my take. So I may be wrong about that. It is that on the one hand, for the audience, it's very tittillating. Say, oh, two beautiful women, and hey, fantastic. They're having some kind of a sexual relationship, but it's presented as really a kind of a nightmare. So again, you have the sort of the Hollywood glamour, hey, how do we make a film that's going to make a huge amount of money? Hey, let's make it about two women in love, two beautiful women. Great. We'll have some nice sex scenes and whatever, and so on. But then he turns into a complete nightmare. The reality is that this love affair um, was became a nightmare. I mean, and leading the Betty Diane character to want to kill Camilla, because Camilla was basically leaving her for the film director, a man. Um, so I think it's more like, again, he has the dream, and then there's the reality. So there's the dream, the Betty, the young ingenue who comes to Hollywood, and she's going to make it and whatever, and then we have the nightmare of her failed life, living in kind of essentially fairly miserably in poverty. Maybe she's going to head all the way down to becoming a prostitute, and then the same with the lesbianism. It's very glamorous. You can make some money on this, and then it turns into really a very very dismal, destructive relationship. Kind of that's how I saw it. I didn't really see the lesbianism as anything other than a kind of a plot device. I didn't see it as that. It was a central feature of the film. Again, I thought that, as always happens, the queer community seizes on this, and then of course they disapproved of it. They didn't like the way it was handled and so on. But I thought it was just more of a plot device than anything very serious. And that kind of reminded me of Frida, that film. It was made by Harvey Weinstein, or at least Harvey Weinstein was the producer, and and Harvey Weinstein. It was a project by that. Oh God, the name of that Mexican actress who was in who played Frida. Somebody will remember the name of that actress. Who is it? Does anyone remember the name? Yeah. No, well, anyway, it'll come to me. So it was her project. She really wanted to do the project. Salma Hayek, that's the one. Salma Hayek, yeah, very beautiful, the Mexican actress. It was her project. She wanted to do this on Frida, but Harvey Weinstein, being a kind of a sleazebag that he was, said, "Well, you need to put in a lesbian scene in there." And Salma Hayek, I think, supposedly said, "Well, I don't want to do that. It's just simply, exploitative. Blah blah. Just this is supposed to be a film about the creation of art in Mexico. It's about Diego Rivera. I said, nah. He said, you need to put in a lesbian scene, and not just a lesbian scene. You got to put a nude lesbian scene. You got to put it in." All right. And and the he said, "Well, we can either make the film or we cannot make the film. But if we are going to make the film, then you've got to have a nude lesbian scene. So it's up to you." And of course, Salma Hayek said, "Oh, okay, well, then we'll put the nude lesbian scene," because the point was that without that, no one was going to watch the film. That was it. I mean, no one was going to watch a film about Frida Kahlo and her tempestuous love affair with Diego Rivera. I mean, Salma Hayek may want, that's the film she wanted to make. But Weinstein, very shrewd, and David Lynch knows about shrewd characters in Hollywood, and he kind of presented them in that film. He said, you're not going to get anyone to watch this film unless you put in something that's sexy. And of course, 90% of the people who went to see Frida went to see it because they wanted to see Salma Hayek in a nude lesbian scene. I mean, that's how Hollywood operates. And Lynch kind of realizes that's how Hollywood operates. That's how you're going to make some money, because otherwise, no one is going to go and watch some artsy movie. So that's how I read it. Now, um, the interpretation that it's a kind of a dream that you have, that the dream of Betty as a successful, and then the first part, and then she's a failure and whatever. I mean, I can see that. Um, I mean, I think that it is the arc of her career, and I think it's. I mean, obviously there's a dream-like element, but I think it's significant that towards the end, when they have that dinner party, she says, "Oh, my aunt died several years ago." So you have to then assume that a number of years has gone by, because at the beginning of the film, the aunt is very much alive. We see her at the beginning. So now she says at the dinner party, "Oh, my aunt died several years ago." So I think so. That's why I think there's an arc that the film traces of dreams becoming a kind of a nightmare. That whole Hollywood kind of churns out these homogenized products. Some, for whatever reason, succeed. Now, one reason why Camilla Rhodes succeeded was that the mob intervened and gave her this big starring part. You know, but otherwise, we just don't know. You could be very talented, but you don't get the right part, you don't get the right break, and that's it. So, but I think the one of the problems with I think this film, when you try to try to fit all of the different bits and pieces, all the storylines, um, which aren't explored. You think, well, how do I fit it all into a coherent narrative? Lynch did envisage this as a script for a pilot. He wanted to have this was supposed to be a TV series for ABC, and ABC passed. They didn't like it at all. So if he was thinking about a TV series, then of course he could think about different storylines, and that he was going to explore all these individual storylines in the TV series, but the TV series never materialized. But he still had the script, and so he just shoved it all in the script. And so in the film, you're kind of baffled by the various storylines that don't, that just don't really go anywhere. Like the guy with in the diner with the nightmare, or the assassin, the incompetent assassin. So it's so. I mean, that's a kind of another aspect of the this of trying to interpret Lynch's work in any uh, uh, intelligible, coherent way. Anyway, thank you so much, Cynthia. I'm not sure. I don't know that I'm right. I mean, so I'm trying to figure it out myself. So you may well be right. I would absolutely welcome everybody who watches Mulholland Drive to offer your own interpretations. I mean, it's open to many different interpretations. So please feel free to opine and watch the film and offer your interpretation of what's really going on there. Anyway, Stone River says, thank you so much, Stone River says, not too good for Qatar Airways, one of the best airlines in the world. No, I don't think it is. No. But look, Trump said it's not going to happen again. Promise. It's not going to happen. Pinky promise. It'll never happen again. So So everyone can sit back and relax. But anyway, thank you. And then Dennis Misty, thank you very much, Dennis. Says a lot on my desk at the moment, but I do mean to read Huckabee's Kid's Guide to the Truth About Climate Change. Well, I haven't read that obviously, and you know I actually quite liked Huckabee before he became this nightmarish shill for Israel. I always thought he was very amusing, very kind of funny, um, uh, you know, figure. I remember in um, uh, the you know during the debate, the 2016 debate. This was at the time of real opposition to Trump. This was in the Republican primary debates, and the Republican Party, the establishment, was going hard against Trump, and then you had National Review that came out with that cover story against Trump, and with all these conservative figures all contributing to this against Trump issue. And so at this time, it looked like they were all of Trump's opponents were absolutely solidly opposed to him. And then there was a moment in the debate um, where I think they were all asked, well, what can you spell out what this 2016 campaign is about? And I'm going by memory, so I don't remember exactly. So Huckabee said, well, um, this campaign is between serious, responsible politicians and a person who is only interested in the aggrandizement of power, is only interested in self-promotion, who's only interested in making money, is only interested in the personal opportunities that this presents. And I'm, of course, talking about Hillary Clinton. And that moment, and everyone in the audience sort of burst out laughing because um, Trump himself, he was looking kind of very, he was really beginning to look angrily at Huckabee because he thought, well, this is where this is going. He's going to say, and that person is Donald Trump. He said, no, and that person, of course, is Hillary Clinton. And now that moment, just it broke the tension, and in a way also seemed like, well, that's it. There was all the real opposition towards Trump had disappeared. So I think I think he was always kind of a rather witty person, but he's just a nutcase on Israel, and just absolutely intolerable. And particularly now, when he had made all of those comments about the violence against American Christians, about how hard it was for American Christians to get visas to visit Israel. And after all of that, he's still shilling for Netanyahu. But anyway, thank you so much, Dennis. And Marty, always good to see you, Marty. And Marty, as always, has a great introductory post. And the introductory post is Emmanuel Macron looking angry and frustrated, enraged. Well, as he might well be. He's lost another prime minister, and he's kind of in a bit of a bind. He can't really hold another parliamentary election because he's going to get absolutely humiliated. And so all he can do is to name yet another prime minister. And doubtless this new prime minister will have about the same success in presenting a budget cutting program as his two previous prime ministers. I mean, there's just no support for these, the cuts in welfare, increases in military spending, and no support for cutting back on holidays in France. The French like their holidays, and they want to cut back on these public holidays. No support for any of that, and it's just that neoliberal agenda that Macron is espouses. There's just no support whatsoever for that in the country. So he hires a prime minister to go for another one of these big spending cut program. He's going to fall flat on his face, just as the previous prime minister said. So he can look as unhappy as he likes, but essentially he's just marking time until his presidency comes to an end in a couple of years. And so thank you very much, Marty. Anne Marie, always very good to see you. Anne Marie is, of course, our resident musical expert. And, she's a great musician. She's performed in some of the finest orchestras in the world. And we're very fortunate to have the opportunity to enjoy her insights and comments on the music that we post here as part of the Gaggle Music Club. And I think she, always is very honest about the music, and so she offers very very good trenchant criticism of the music, and I think that's something that's taken on board. And she's just offered a very interesting criticism of the of Martineau that we presented here, and I'm looking forward to answering her comments. But as I say, I think we're very fortunate to have somebody with such musical expertise and kind of professional playing experience that lends additional weight to her comments and criticism. So really appreciate you. Thank you so much, as always, Anne Marie. And then Vic Shakopopoulos says, Dear George, what is your opinion on the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II? And then it says the assassins' links to the Grey Wolves would point to the Western intelligence agencies, but then again, the Polish Pope was rather an asset for them, so there's not much sense in killing him. A plot by the KGB is also unlikely, in my opinion. What are your theories? I have to say, I agree with you, and I think that that's why I've never really had any theories other than that is this these Grey Wolves, which on the face of it never really made very much sense. I only took an interest in the whole story of the assassination because there was a major Western attempt to present the assassination attempt as a plot by the KGB. And the New York Times ran, I don't know how many articles on the story, this alleged story of the KGB plot to assassinate the Pope. And in Chomsky and Herman's book, they devote a whole chapter on that issue of the New York Times and the plot to assassinate the Pope. So they had never had any evidence that the KGB was involved in this, and the KGB would not have engaged in anything. It's a completely self-destructive policy, because if you assassinate the Pope, then you make him a martyr, and whatever harm, whatever threat they face because of the Pope and because of his Polishness and the fact that his presence had on the Poles and their anti-communism of the Poles, and then ultimately the effect that he would have throughout Eastern Europe. So whatever threat that they face through John Wojtyla becoming the Pope would double and treble if they assassinate him, because the moment you assassinate Wojtyla, then the suspicion will be, and of course, the KGB and the Soviet Union. And now he's dead, he's a martyr, and he was assassinated by the Soviets. So, they're going to, whatever headaches the Soviets were getting in Eastern Europe, and particularly in Poland, would have been, increased, I don't know how many fold as a result. So that's why I didn't think that the KGB would engage in anything so pointless. Um, and I agree with what you said. Why would the CIA do this? He was very, very useful to the West as what he was, which was he worked with the CIA. I mean, he actually worked with them to help found Solidarity. He worked with the CIA to get printing presses into Poland. He worked with the CIA to get computers into Poland. He worked with the CIA to get all sorts of material into Poland. I mean, all of this has been described in great detail. I mean, Carl Bernstein described it in great detail in his book, and so so all of this, we know the Pope was a key figure in the destruction of communism during the 1980s. So there would be very little point in the CIA, um, you know, killing somebody who was basically a U.S. asset. So we can eliminate, I think, the CIA and the KGB, and then so we then have the Grey Wolves. I don't know. I don't know why. What was their motive? I mean, I don't know. I've never um, understood it, and I've never heard a coherent explanation as to what was the reason for it. But I remember that guy, the assassin, tried to make out that somehow the KGB was behind it, and maybe that was the reason for it. This was just a Cold War operation to assassinate the Pope, or make an attempt to assassinate the Pope, and lay the blame on the KGB, so that this would, and it did damage. There's no question. The Soviets suffered grave damage. First of all, obviously there was a great reputational damage in having a Pole as the Pope. They knew that this was going to give them enormous headaches in Poland, in having Wojtyla as the Pope. But then, when there's an assassination attempt, and all fingers immediately point towards the KGB, that did the Soviet Union a great deal of damage, even though there was really never any evidence of KGB involvement. But the very fact that the Western media continued peddling the story about the KGB attempt to kill the Pope, I think it hurt the Soviet Union. So it may well have been that was the whole purpose of this, that we make an attempt and then we try to blame the KGB for it. But I'm just speculating here. I mean, that maybe that was the objective, to discredit the Soviet Union by doing this. But anyway, thank you, Vic. And then Anne Marie says, I remember a few months ago there were talks of a new mRNA vaccine against cancer soon being available, and now Russia has just presented its new mRNA cancer vaccine, and now Trump is posting that all vaccines are poisonous. What should we think about all of this? Um, the Russians are going for this cancer vaccine, and at the moment they're just presenting it in a kind of, that's an experimental stage, and so but as far as I understand, I mean, as far as the Russians are offering this to cancer patients, so they're not offering it to healthy people. So, why don't you vaccinate yourself against getting cancer? I think they're offering this, or at least they're offering it for free to people who already have cancer. Um, in the way that whenever you bring experimental medication on the market, you offer it to those who are already seriously ill. They don't really have anything to lose in taking this experimental medicine. I mean, that was my understanding, that's what the Russians are doing. So I'm not sure how it would work as a vaccine. I think that if they're offering it to those who already have the cancer, because I don't think there's going to be any takers um, for a vaccine if you don't already have cancer. I mean, you're going to take an experimental vaccine against something that you don't already have. I mean that would be a real you'd really be risking your health for that. So I think that was my understanding of the Russia. As far as Trump is concerned, I think that he's in a bind because he's appointed Bobby Jr. as his Department of Health and Human Services chief, and Bobby and that whole Maha movement, Make America Healthy Again, it's a key part of his base. So it wasn't just enough to be Make America Great Again. I think it was important for him in 2024 to have Bobby there and espouse this, essentially a kind of libertarian, anti-corporatist, anti-medical bureaucracy stance. I think it was, that somehow people should have a control about what goes into their bodies. People should have control about um, what kind of food they eat. All sort of going against the corporation, all the crap that they put into the processed foods. So I think that was a key part of Trump's message in 2024. I mean, he would probably have won even so, but I think Bobby played an important role in that election. I think Maha goes hand in hand with MAGA. So I think he's now expressing the skepticism against the vaccines, even though he still says, Operation Warp Speed was this fantastic success. But I think he's getting around it by saying, well, that was then, this is now, we've moved on. So so yeah, that was good when I did that. We had a big public health emergency, so that was, blah, blah. But now I think he's coming around to the extent with Trump that he holds to any view consistently. He's coming around to the Bobby Kennedy's view, which is we got to be very, very skeptical about vaccines. I think that's an important part of his base. I mean, the base, which is they really were frustrated and angry about the COVID years, really frustrated and angry about the mandates, and I think also on the corporations, stuffing crappy food down people's throats. I think so. So I think he needs to maintain the Maha cohort in his coalition. So I think that's why he's now talking in terms of the vaccines are poisonous. So uh, despite all the attacks that Bobby has come under, Trump has supported him. However, one should also say that he had these ghouls and ogres having dinner with him in the White House on the very day that Trump was, on the very day that Bobby was testifying, and these are some of the worst people on the planet when it comes to the vaccines. Well, there was Bill Gates. He was sitting next to Melania, um, and so therefore he was just one seat away from Trump. So how seriously should we take Trump's claims that vaccines are poisonous if you have somebody like Bill Gates just sitting, next to your wife? He had Zuckerberg, and I remember how what Zuckerberg did, censoring any um, questioning of the mRNA vaccine. And we know Zuckerberg was in cahoots with Fauci. I mean, we know the correspondence. Fauci told him, hey, take down everything on Facebook that calls into question the the natural origins of COVID and calls into question the efficacy of the vaccines. And Zuckerberg duly did so. So you have to be a little skeptical of Trump's sudden conversion to the anti-vaccine cause when you have people like Gates sitting at your dinner table. So anyway, thank you so much, Anne Marie. This is a really interesting question. Um, and I'll get to the to commenting on your very interesting observations on Martineau. Anyway, my time is up, and thank you very much for everybody who has joined me. Thank you so much for all of your really interesting comments and questions and insights. I always learn so much from this kind of exchanges. And above all, thank you for all those who put something into the tip jar because, Wednesday morning, the dogs, first thing they do in the morning is check the tip jar. Second thing is to blame me for the dismal state of the tip jar. But um, that's the way of the world. So, but anyway, thank you so much. And we will resume on Thursday. I hope to see you then. And until then, all the best. Bye bye. Good night.